Hello, my name is Olivia Doggett from the University of Toronto. I'm presenting the literature review, HCI research on agriculture, competing sociotechnical imaginaries, definitions, and opportunities. I'm presenting on behalf of my co-authors, Dr. Kelly Bronson and Dr. Robert Soden. The viability and security of our food systems is a serious concern for the future survival of humans and non-humans. Directions for policies, services, and technologies to support our food systems are commonly divided between conventional industrialized agricultural practices, which prioritize efficient food production and profitability, versus alternative smaller scale ones, which aim to sustain the environment. These two visions are coherent and widespread and have existed for over 60 years. In our preliminary review of HCI literature addressing agriculture, we identified a similar pattern amongst HCI scholars who describe a binary between organic versus non-organic farming, or conventional versus alternative practices. Given the critical nature of a sustainability transition in food production, it is important to investigate how scholars in HCI materially and conceptually address farming in their research. Therefore, in this paper, we ask two questions. First, what kinds of agricultural challenges does HCI address, and how does the scholarship seek to meet these challenges through technological support and intervention? And second, how do projects from HCI scholars align with these longstanding competing agricultural paradigms and visions? For our literature review, we limited our selection to ACM library only. We selected the keywords agriculture and farming because we wanted to conduct a broad search of publications related to agriculture and technology. We selected 107 papers for full review, and we conducted two evaluatory phases. The first was we reviewed each paper by 15 factors, such as farm type or geographic location, based on Jasanoff and Kim's process for sketching out sociotechnical imaginaries. Our second phase was analyzing each paper according to 6 key elements of competing agricultural paradigms of conventional versus alternative farming. These elements were defined by Boos and Dunlap, as we can see here, and we rely upon these elements for discussion and comparison, but we note that we leverage this framework not because it encompasses all farm types and development contexts, but because this binary is reflective of how HCI appears to often frame visions and possibilities for its participation in agriculture-related research. Moving into the first phase of evaluation, we can see that agriculture-related literature is a growing area where 70% of the total corpus was published in the past 5 years. There was 4 common agricultural sites mentioned, the most common being subsistence farms, as discussed in 40 papers, followed by commercial farms, small-scale organic farms, and urban farms and gardens. Most subsistence farm papers are located in the global south, and most organic and urban farm papers are located in the global north. Smallholder farmers are the most common social actor, followed by urban gardeners, actor replacement, technologists, and farm workers. Actor replacement refers to when the projects aim to replace a specific person through automation or technology. The most common problem frames for projects were around supporting sustainability, as emphasized in 37 papers, followed by bridging knowledge gaps, leveraging technological opportunities, and supporting farmer livelihood. The most common sociotechnical outcomes are ICTs, followed by IoTs, farmer expertise, mobile apps, and machine learning. We refer to farmer expertise when projects aim to support a pre-existing farmer knowledge. 65 papers do not mention climate change. These papers are mostly subsistence or commercial farm papers, most of which located from the global south. 42 papers do mention climate change, and most of these papers are organic or urban farm papers from the global north. Moving on to the second phase of evaluation, looking at all corpus papers, we can see that there's a strong alignment with alternative practices, where 52% of codes align with alternative, followed by 30% with conventional and 18% with uncategorized. The corpus was most strongly aligned on the alternative elements of decentralization and independence, which means that many of the HCI papers support smaller scale farming initiatives and with tools and technologies that lead to more independent livelihoods. The corpus was fairly evenly divided between competition versus community. And for the three final elements, which focus on relationships with nature, the corpus is fairly evenly divided between conventional alternative agriculture and uncategorized. Digging more deeply into the four specific farm types, starting with the most common, we can see that subsistence farm papers are not aligned to a specific paradigm nor defined by the framework, as is represented through the fairly even distribution of codes between conventional, alternative, and uncategorized. Similar to the total corpus, alternative codes are concentrated within decentralization and independence. The conventional element of competition is prominent, however, in the subsistence corpus. We also note that for the three final elements, most papers were coded uncategorized, as most papers do not address relationships with nature, growing practices, or crop types. Referring now to the three other farm site types, most of which are aligned in the global north, we can see, maybe unsurprisingly, strong alignment with one of the two competing paradigms: commercial farm papers strongly aligning with conventional agriculture, and urban farm or organic farm papers strongly aligning with alternative agriculture. Moving into the discussion, we ask, what do the competing paradigms tell us about HCI literature on agriculture? We know that the corpus papers situated in the global north are strongly aligned with either conventional versus alternative agriculture. Subsistence farm papers, mostly from the global south, however, do not align with either paradigm. Why is this happening? We think that this lack of alignment is not surprising, given that Boson-Dunlap's framework assumes a capitalistic economic model where food products, even at a small scale, are sold for a profit. This assumption does not hold in subsistence farming contexts, where many farmers are growing and selling for their own consumption, or in local bartering economies. The impact of the misalignment is that subsistence farming papers appear to match with conventional elements such as competition. We believe that these alignments occur because of incongruous definitions of terms like need and profit. In development contexts, need refers to necessities crucial for basic survival, versus often in global north settings, needs may relate to consumer needs or desires, as base survival is assumed to be accounted for. As subsistence farm papers are the most common in the HCI corpus, we must deeply consider these agricultural contexts more in our work, particularly when defining missions for how HCI should support agriculture. We leave you with 4 final recommendations that are outlined more fully in the paper. Our first recommendation is we think that it's important to expand problem framing for HCI beyond competing paradigms. For example, we think it's important to consider environmental justice principles and commitments as useful resources to help shift the alternative agricultural paradigm to be more inclusive of peasant and subsistence farming. Our second recommendation is we think it's important to manage research positionality and the materiality of technologies by focusing on where do technologies come from, how do they travel, how are they managed and consumed. Our third recommendation is we think it's important to define what constitutes a socio-technical outcome for agriculture. There were many outputs in the literature that are not generative in a traditional HCI sense of problem solving through creating new technologies or systems. What is enough of a technological intervention or output in agriculture to be considered HCI? Our final recommendation is we think it is important to consider commercial farming settings and farm workers more, as we are dependent upon these actors and contexts for food system stability. So that's all in final, and we encourage you to read the rest of our paper. Thank you very much for your time.